Welcome to My Voice Forum Global 2022. Speak Up, Be Heard, an initiative by KitKat Events and Marketing in association with Global Influencers Publishing House. The event is taking place from the 23rd to 25th of November and features over 40 world-renowned international speakers, thought leaders, academics, experts, and community builders with the purpose of coming together to discuss issues related to women facing in this changing world and how we can collaborate to move forward. Each topic has been well curated and researched, providing attendees a thought-provoking and an interactive platform to exchange views and reflect upon overcoming challenges to achieve our personal best. To know more about our events and to join our community, you can follow our LinkedIn page and join the My Voice Forum Facebook group. Look out for details on the chat. And of course, if you were also interested in writing or sharing your journey, please do get in touch with us. Details of Global Influencers Publishing House are being shared on the chat. Now, with that, we come to the final panel discussion of today. From surviving to thriving, how the pandemic has changed lives. Dictionary defines surviving as remaining alive or in existence, living on, or continuing to function, whilst defining thriving as to grow vigorously, to flourish, to progress towards, or to prosper. When the global corona pandemic hit in early 2020, no one knew what the long-term effects are going to be, how it's going to impact our economies, societies, and our lives. We continue to live, rather survive, through these strange and uncertain times. The pandemic affected everything we did, from how we worked to how we interacted with each other. Terms like languishing and phrases such as the great resignation worked their way into our conversations. But just from definition itself, one can already tell which one we should be working towards. While surviving is good in that it implies continuation, what people really want out of life is to thrive. But thriving requires a mindset of knowing that life is bigger than just the current circumstances, and faith that things will ultimately work out. We can have a thriving mentality by simply being purposeful with our values, deliberately deciding how we spend our time and focusing on activities that bring us joy and fulfillment. In Maya Angelou's words, my mission in life is not merely to survive, but to thrive, and to do that with some passion, some compassion, some humor, and some style. Hi, everyone. I'm Neera Gupta, the Chief Visionary Officer and founder of Global Influencers Publishing House and KitKat Events and Marketing, and I will be your moderator for this session. Once again, to everyone who's just joined us, please keep those comments and questions coming in the chat. And of course, don't be shy to show your support for our panelists. With that, I will welcome our first panelist for the session, Gina Marisha. Based in Hong Kong, Gina lives her commitment to directly enable a more diverse and inclusive leadership by being a certified professional facilitator, executive coach, inclusion advocate, and speaker. Gina's leadership programs have empowered women to define, choose, navigate, and find their unique leadership voice at home and on corporate platforms for over 24 years. She even published the book, Impactful Leadership, Unlock Your Power, CABI, with their stories. Gina is also co-authoring the book, My Voice, Volume 5, to be released in Jan 2023, which I'm sure is also going to be an Amazon #1 bestseller. Up next, we have Kieran Robinson. Based in Luxembourg, Kieran is a culinarian, food consultant, concept designer, and service curator who launched her own catering and concept company in Hong Kong. Backed by 30 years of experience in hospitality sector, Kiran devotes her time to writing, speaking, and coaching on service leadership and the true art of hospitality, which prompted her to write the book called Seva, the Art of Hospitality. Kiran is also the co-author of the Amazon #1 best-selling book, My Voice, Volume 5. Up next is Christiane Baum. Now, based in Australia, Christiane has worked across several industries. And now, as a certified coach, trainer, facilitator, clinical hypnotherapist, as well as an international speaker, she is dedicated to inspiring transformation and empowering performance. Her She Speaks suite of programs empowers women to transform their fear of speaking, harnesses their voice, and to confidently step out, speak out, and stand out. Christiane is a co-author of 2 Amazon #1 best-selling books, I'm Possible and My Voice, Volume 3. Next up, we have Valerie Chow. Based in Singapore, Valerie is a 360 marketing and business leader as she drives brand growth in both digital and offline marketing. Valerie uses her passion for D&I with her I'm Remarkable training to empower women and underrepresented groups to speak openly by building confidence. This has led to her building her own voice as a speaker and advocate for self-development and success. Valerie recently co-authored the Amazon #1 best-selling book, Shaken Stirred But Not Deterred. For those of you who would like to find out more about our panelists and connect with them, we've shared their LinkedIn details on the chat, as well as the links to their books, all of which is available on Amazon. With that, let's get started with today's discussion. So Valerie, I'll start with you. How did the pandemic affect you? And what did you do to go from surviving to thriving mode?
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. During the pandemic, as a digital marketer, I actually transitioned very well from working from home, even enjoy working at home, continue networking online, as well as learning a lot online. So I was a really geek person working at home. Unfortunately, during that pandemic, a lot of people were struggling, and some of my friends even lost their jobs during that period. Then the crunch came to me actually when my own career was actually disrupted with my own retrenchment during the pandemic. And I really had to dig deep and climb up during the pandemic. Reflecting back, I knew where I wanted to go in my career. I was in the insurance industry and I wanted to move in the financial field. And pivoting there was truly a challenge, especially in the pandemic. This was the worst of all times. Yeah. But I dig deep, I persevere. I find ways to pivot myself by pitching the relevant skill sets and also leverage on my ability to pivot, as I had done once before a few years back. And I pivoted in a very different industry as well as a different role. So with that experience, a lot of networking and seeking out advice from mentors and experts in their field, that helped me to propel myself forward during that period. And also very importantly, I was constantly building up my personal brand in LinkedIn before that, and that helps. That also was something I learned when I went through the I'm Remarkable training itself to talk about self-promotion, and eventually I also become a trainer myself also. So that's very important, which one of the speakers was talking about this earlier onwards. And during that period of pandemic, it was not easy. There was a lot of heartache and rejection. And this was a long drawn kind of period of time, and we was all stuck at home. And I have to keep on going and going, not knowing what's the outcome and whether there were more rejection coming in because there were so many people jobless during that period of time. And also trying very hard not to succumb to the negativity when you're stuck at home, and I was actually living alone. It was even hard. And on top of that, I had my aged parents to think of, and they are actually based overseas in another different country. So that also put a bit of pressure on me. And then I felt that I could not let my parents down, and so I could not let myself down. That was also a time that I really pushed myself, pushed myself even harder than my first pivot. And eventually I pivoted in my career and moved into a marketing role in the finance field actually within 6 months. And that was very fast actually during a pandemic. That was a time that I really dig deep, and my energy and motivation was so high to not give up. There was an inner drive inside me that kept me going, to sustain by my own belief that I can do it once, I can do it before. So it's good to reflect back what you have done during a hard time and use that energy inside you to keep you going during a hard time. And at the same time, supported by my own meditation and mindfulness of self, plus the advice and support of those around me. So all this and feeling of gratefulness and being positive, even though it was a negative downtime for me during that period, that helps me a lot. And looking back how I thrived through it all, I also decided to write my career pivoting journey during a pandemic inside the book, Shaken, Stir, But Not Deterred. So I wrote it down so that I can remember what I went through, and I hope to use that story to inspire others to put their best foot forward, whether in a pandemic or any time that they are down, and thrive on towards where their goal is.
No wonder, Valerie, they call you the maverick of career pivots. Thank you for sharing that. Now, my next question is for you, Christian. Now, clearly, the pandemic affected your life and your business. How did you respond to it, and in turn, helped your clients through it?
I love so much about that, Neera. And respond being the operative word. I share with my clients quite frequently, awareness is 95% of the journey. I believe it's about focusing on one's locus of control, the degree to which we, as opposed to the external forces, have control over the outcome of the events in our lives. Are you reacting or are you responding? We may not be able to control our environment, what happens around us. However, we can control how we respond. Are you at cause or are you at effect? Is life happening for you? Is life happening to you? Are you a victim or are you a victor? Are you focusing on reasons or are you focusing on results? So I really supported my clients to shift their perspectives, to broaden their horizons. Is life happening for them or to them? Are they above the line or below the line? I firmly believe that through crisis comes opportunity. We just need to think differently.
That goes very beautifully with also what your chapter was about as well: reflect, reassess, and realign. And you've spoken about that as well many times, and these are just perfect words. And it also goes to what Valerie was saying, that we need to think about, we need to reassess and we need to reflect. And this is exactly what pandemic has allowed us to do. So thank you very much for sharing that.
And if I could add to that, Neera, the thing I love, and it was such a privilege to feature in My Voice, in the My Voice series. My chapter was titled, live life by design, not default. So again, the correlation between, is life happening to us or for us? And I love the synergy and the alignment. Let's not just survive, but thrive through this adversity.
Absolutely. Well said. And that brings me to you, Kiran, because what I've always loved is that you've said that the pandemic made you stronger. Now, tell us a little bit more about this, and were you able to also influence others to do this?
Most certainly. Good afternoon, Dr. Gupta. It's so lovely to see you and all of the ladies. What a privilege to be invited on this platform. So, Dr. Gupta, the pandemic did create a lot of stress and challenges, obviously. But for me personally, I think it's okay to be grateful for challenges that were meant for me in particular. At the start of the pandemic, I had just finished my last project in the US at Stanford Hospital. We had just built a new hospital, and they knew I was moving to Luxembourg, but they wanted me to keep coming back, 3 weeks in Luxembourg, 3 weeks in the States, going back and forth and just, making sure the bits and pieces are done. And then I remember I was there in California, and there was a president's speech on television, and he's declaring a pandemic. I took the next flight back home, and I was like, okay, all right, Lord, I'm here in Luxembourg. What do I do now? I had this strong feeling that there's not going to be any going back 3 weeks here and 3 weeks there anymore. I really have to think and think hard. I wasn't perturbed. Naturally, there was a little bit of nervousness and anxiety, having worked in one place, at Stanford for 17 years of my life. And now it's like, okay, what do I do now? Okay. I realized I had to reinvent myself. I had to pivot. And because I felt it was a new beginning for me, I was definitely motivated to pursue new goals. And the first thing I think I did was get out there, brave the cold weather in Luxembourg. Remember, I'm born in India, raised in Hong Kong, and had my career in California for 20 years. And now I'm in Luxembourg. What is snow? What is rain? Perpetual rain, And then I said to myself one morning during my walks that if 650,000 people here in this tiny Luxembourg can do it, I can do it too. And I did. With snowflakes on my eyelashes and rain on my head, I was like, I'm going to do this. And believe it or not, it was my morning walks, my faith that gave me that stamina to be able to say, I can do this. And I did. I wrote my first book, Seva, The Art of Hospitality. It's an expression of my 30 years of work. And then, of course, I met you, and I co-authored my volume, My Voice, Volume 5, which was based on resilience. So writing became my therapy, But then with that comes the setting up your website, doing newsletters and all that. And I'm not tech savvy at all. But I was like, no, I'm going to do this, and I can do this. The lockdown imposed a lot of boundaries, but it actually forced me to practice saying no. Setting boundaries freed me. I made it a point to celebrate myself. I took pride in the way I was accepting a new situation, even though my kids would be like, Mom, what are you doing? You're on social media, but do you know what you're doing? No, but I'll do it anyways. It's okay. We can do this. And that's exactly what I did. I learned to practice hospitality, seva, and gratitude in a deeper way, in a more meaningful way. Did I influence others? I believe I did. I felt that there were a lot of young expats here who needed a touch of family. And I, believe it or not, I reached out to them. And then, of course, there are all the chefs that I love in the hospitality field. And I reached out to them. And when I could travel out there in Europe a little bit here and there, I did that, just making sure that everybody's okay, everybody's safe. I set up Bible study virtual groups on WhatsApp or Zoom or whatever. And it was good. It gave me a sense of family, and it gave the young ones who I was mentoring a sense of there is someone whose door we can knock at. There is someone we can reach out to. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing that. And I love what you said, that we can be grateful to even in the most difficult challenges that come our way. And I think this I wasn't planning on, but I do want to share my experience as well with the pandemic, of how gratitude happen and how such amazing things happen. Now, of course, in the beginning of the pandemic, we had to all show we're in control, and we were all putting these amazing pictures of cocktails and bread and everything that we were making. But the truth is that we were all suffering. I mean, there were good days, but there were some very terrible days, like homeschooling and the fear of pandemic, everybody working from home, and we're not used to spending that much time at home with everybody. So there were struggles. And of course, as many of you know, that's where we started the whole My Voice movement, to bring together women from our network together to talk about things that mattered, to create that safe space where we could discuss issues and challenges, and of course, use this time to become better versions of ourselves. And even now, we're amazed how that small initiative where we had, probably 10 people who joined the first event, to now having grown this network to over thousands of women across the world. And none of this truly would have been possible had the pandemic not hit. In fact, the fact that we were able to then come out and set up Global Influencers Publishing House and bring out all these amazing stories, to thousands of women around the world, making and promoting so many authors and being able to inspire people and giving them this opportunity to leave a legacy, to be able to then not just showcase their journeys, but also help people move from living ordinary to extraordinary achievers. So all of this, I have to say, has been because of the pandemic. So definitely, to your point, Karen, that we have a lot to be grateful for as well. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
And now this brings me to you, Gina. Now, I definitely want to talk about this because in January 2020, when we had spoken, you had begun using a 4-stage survive to thrive resilience cycle with your clients and people in the community. Now, I will ask about that a little later, but I want to know from you, what prompted you to start using this in the first place?
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Neera. So I'm so glad I went last because the interesting thing is when I was listening to Valerie's story and to Kiran's story, right, and to your own story as well, I was tracking, I can't help myself, I'm an organizational psychologist and I focus on resilience. I'm a thought leader around resilience. So I was listening out, what were the strategies that they were using, the behaviors, the thoughts, how they were using their community. But what was interesting for me was by the time COVID hit, I actually was already absolutely exhausted. I know, and I've already been operating in the space, that adversity is absolutely a catalyst for growth and learning. And so about 12 years ago, I brought a resilience framework to Asia, and I've been working with clients and individuals really around how do they be their resilient, authentic selves, and how do they build resilient organizations. But I have to tell you, the secret is that January 2020, I was exhausted. And in fact, what had happened already 6 months before COVID was beginning to break was that living in Hong Kong, we had had 6 months of protests. My business was decimated. I run regional leadership programs. I was always on a plane or else people were flying into Hong Kong. At the same time, the 3 other businesses that I run with my husband had been like chopped off at the knees. So we were exhausted come January. And I was in Beijing at the beginning of January with a particular client, and I could literally smell the fear. Everyone was wearing masks already. And I came back to Hong Kong and I said to my husband, look, there's nothing happening here. We've tried numerous things. I've tried so much that I know around how to be resilient. And I think I'm failing. So why don't we leave Hong Kong and go and sit on a lake in Italy? And I need to get some coaching around this because quite frankly, how do I continue to show up as a resilient thought leader when I myself, I'm just seriously exhausted. All my resilience techniques and strategies, etc., were simply not working for me. And so how could I then be a catalyst for others? And the incredible thing happened was in January, we left before Chinese New Year, and I spoke to two of my go-to resilience gurus. So I'm part of a group of psychologists, and I called Ali and Joe up and I said, okay, clearly the resilience framework we're using is not working because it's not working for me. And it was so funny because Ali said two things to me. He said, Gina, out of all the work you've done out of Asia and how the work we've done in this region has impacted global norms around the resilience framework, he said, do you remember how you changed our definition of resilience? So I said, yeah, it's the capacity to positively adapt to change, setback, and challenge in order to achieve peak performance. And all the work we've done in Asia, also well-being. And he said, and what was the one thing you've learned of these last 12 years? You told us that. And he reminded me that number one, resilience is a resource. Damn it. And I was like, I'd forgotten. I was so busy doing and trying to frame what I was thinking and what I was doing in action, which is something that both Valerie and who else? It was someone else who highlighted it's being in action and activity, Christiane. So that was the first thing. And the second thing he said is, he said, do you know, one of the things that you've challenged us on is approaching resilience in a linear fashion, where you go from a setback, change, challenge, you hit survival, and then you suddenly jump to thrive, is not helping people, particularly when we're dealing with adversity and setback and challenge like the pandemic, that actually is not a once-off occurrence. It's a series of setbacks and challenges on many levels over time. And what we know about the human experience is that we are more impacted by these incremental setbacks over time necessarily than one impact. So he said to me, what we've done is, and I've got this little article here, he introduced me to the Thrive cycle. So I'm going to actually just kind of hold that up. I don't know if you can see it, but basically there's this delicious phase between surviving and thriving, and that rocked my world. So essentially what I did was I took all the roles I have in my life, and all of you on this call, I know that if I had to ask you, write down the roles you have in your life, you would definitely have more than 6 or 7. So I took what were the most important roles in my life and I mapped it to the Thrive cycle. And I could see that in certain roles, I was in survival mode. In certain roles, I was adapting. In certain roles, I was recovering. And in certain roles, I was thriving. And so beginning to work with this model, not just survive to thrive, particularly, I think, in collectivist societies like APAC and Africa, we don't like to talk about when we're thriving. I'm okay, right? So anyone talking about thriving, there's almost this like survivor guilt. So even if you were thriving, you don't say it because everyone else is saying, I'm in survival mode, or else I'm okay. So this, the Thrive cycle absolutely rocked my world at the beginning of the pandemic. And throughout that time, I was then able to stand in my own resilience and then support my community, my family, and my clients. And it's not easy. I think whilst today I can tell you the story of how incredible things have played out in my life, I think we can never underestimate the brutal emotional stress and turmoil that goes through anyone experiencing a setback, a challenge, a change, and the emotional fallout that happens when you're in survival, adapting, recovery, and even thrive. So even though many of you today, I know, have survived, more than survived, thrived in this pandemic, the residual scars, the stories, and I think the impact is here. Just one last thing to say, whenever we're dealing with the humans in communities and in organizations, because I'm more interested in performance in organizations. I think I draw off some of the statistics that come from Martin Seligman, so father of positive psychology, where he was basically saying in a massive setback like this pandemic and what we've experienced in the fallout, 1/3 of people will actually work through this and get to a point where they've recovered and they can kind of, in a way, go back to normal, at least their normal performance and well-being state. 1/3 will absolutely use it as a catalyst for growth and learning and emerge stronger, even more resilient. And 1/3 are actually going to remain stuck. And this is where I think all of us have got a role to play in our families, communities, and organizations. And this Thrive cycle has certainly helped me to help people map, frame, find a language to talk about where they're at. And then from there, and I go back to Kirian's thing, is then respond and choose the most appropriate resilience strategies for you. One of the things that's super irritating for me is if I'm in survival mode, and someone says to me, look on the bright side, Gina, or what are you learning from this? Or adopt a growth mindset. I'm like, really? When you're in survival mode, you're dealing with a lot of emotional impact. There's fight, flight, freeze. And what you need more than anything else is support, to feel safe, to feel like there's a space that you can be supported in. So that's all I wanted to say on that side.
Thank you very much for that. And I can't wait to hear more about the 4-phase cycle. But to that point, I still remember the time when they had extended the circuit breaker or so-called lockdown in Singapore. And I literally, I'm telling you, I'm not joking, I was weeping. I wept. And my husband was like, oh, no, look at the brighter side. You get to spend more time with us and family. And I cried even more. Don't tell me that. But, and of course, everyone's loving what you said. Resilience is a resource. Christian's made a hashtag. So now that's going to be the thing that we're going to be using. But I really like what you said. And I guess most of us had not realized this, how we've all come out of it very differently. Like you said, 1/3 of people are recovering from this. 1/3 are using this as a catalyst to be more resilient, but there are 1/3 of people who are remaining stuck. So the strategy for each group of people has to be different. So we can't expect people to go from one to other without actually understanding, which again goes back to, reflecting and reassessing of how the strategy has to be for us to go from that survival through the different stages to the actual thriving. And again, it's different for different people. Some people can move very quickly, while some people take a little bit more time and need a little bit more help. And I think one of the things that has also come out in the pandemic is our ability to show our vulnerability. We don't have to be perfect. We don't have to show that, we've got everything under control. We're suddenly now through this, we're okay to say, I'm not okay. I need help. And everything's not perfect, and that's fine. That's fine. And so I think there are a lot of positives that have come out of this. And with that, I want to come back to you, Valerie. I want to know how you think people can continue to thrive, and going back to the whole resilience piece, how, according to you, they can build that resilience, especially in such uncertain times, because you've done it, you've been through it. How do you think people can do it as well?
Thanks, Neera. What Gina was talking about, and then summarizing all our thoughts and all that. And she made me realize also something, that when during that pandemic, that time I was going nonstop. I was almost like a Duracell bunny, continuing nonstop. It was very tough. And after a while, I realized that, and then I hit a roadblock, and I had one biggest major rejection during that period of time. And that was my wake-up call, that I said, okay, I need a break. I took a break. Like for 2 weeks, I did not do anything, that I need to go into like apply a job or something related to that. I just took a break because I realized that I was going all out without giving myself a true break, without giving myself a good rest. And that's when you realize that how important that is to your own, your mind, your body, and your soul. So coming to that, how you can continue to build and thrive during uncertain times. I think there's 3 key areas: your mind, your body, and soul. Why? Because a strong mind that knows how to pick oneself up, how to rethink and be flexible to changes. This I actually learned through my own mindfulness journey itself. I'm not saying that you always have to be positive and rah-rah and all that, but you catch yourself and be alert and bring back yourself to your center. So a strong mind is very important, and that's what keep you going. And the next part is actually a body that is well tuned to conserve, to run well, meaning you eat well, balance it with good exercise, and have the strength to keep on going. Because strength, the inner strength, that will help you to build up and sustain your own strong mind itself. And the final part is very important, your soul. You have to have the inner strength to live on your own self, or an anchor within yourself. Because you can have any old support and all that, but at the end of the day, whether you take any action or move forward or move any part, is your own self. So that's your own anchor. So all this actually, I do reflection after I've been through during the pandemic. Then I realized how important all this play a part in keeping myself and sustaining myself. So for example, I do a lot of yoga and meditation. I do meditation daily. I do yoga like 5 times per week. I enjoy doing that, and this helped me keep me centered and calm. And also in any times, I mean, in any time you walk on life, you don't need to wait until a pandemic to do anything, but I think it's a perseverance of your own self and knowing your own self, and that helps you to build that long-term resilience. And if anything comes towards you, you are strong enough to be able to sustain it and maintain yourself in good order too.
Thank you for that, Valerie. And before we move on to our next question, I do want to share some wonderful comments that are coming through. So many wonderful credentials, Gina. KA is super inspirational and transformation. KA is Christiane, just in case somebody didn't know. People have agreed with you, Valerie, when you were first sharing your stories about the pivoting. I'm inspired by your resilience, Valerie. Really enjoyed your sharing, Valerie. So much to resonate, Christiane, and keep it going and being grateful. Christiane is a phenomenal speaker, coach, and mentor, supporting women to step out, speak out, and stand out. Her She Speaks program has transformed my fear of public speaking. Such amazing feedback. And lovely. That's the spirit, Kiran, when you were talking about all the positive things that came out. Inspiring, Kiran. Wonderful. Challenges exist, yet gratitude helps to keep a positive attitude. Thanks for sharing. Also, again, some more comments that came through were extraordinary examples of power of pivot. And of course, for me, congratulations to me, celebrating me and my team and everything we do. Sounds weird, me reading for myself. Some more comments that have come out is it's really wonderful to hear the untold stories of the pandemic. I expect stories of this nature will continue to surface for many years to come. Thank you for sharing, ladies. These are just such brilliant comments that have come through. Again, Karen, people have agreed with you about pivoting, that it's essential in pandemic. And of course, you know, for us to bring out this topic. Again, for you, Gina, they've said they appreciate your vulnerability. Like I said, KA loves it. She's going to go with the hashtag resilience is a resource. And some more comments here coming through where they've said, look, we admire your ability to turn your gaze inward and reflect upon yourself and your environment. Gina, breaking the patterns that brought us comfort in the past and identifying our needs in any given situation are vital to overcoming adversity. And a lot of other people have agreed to this, that support is needed. And thank you for bringing up vulnerability, Gina, for the Thrive cycle roles and different stages of each role. Resilience is a resource. Loving it. So thank you, everybody, for your comments. Please keep them coming. And with that, I will move on to my next question, but we are going to read some more comments in a bit. Now, Christiane, I have often heard you say, there is a gift in everything. And that gift in this case of pandemic was an opportunity to demonstrate flexibility and agility. I would love to hear more on that.
Yes. I love this. Absolutely, Nera. So the gift was an opportunity to demonstrate flexibility and agility. You know, on a side note, I really loved your reference to setbacks, Gina. I'm an advocate of a setback being a setup for a comeback. You know, what if we were to consider an obstacle being a detour in the right direction? I'll just let that land. What if we were to consider an obstacle being a detour in the right direction? In my capacity as a practitioner of positive psychology, as a coach, as a therapist, I often refer to the concept of behavioral flexibility, which in essence presupposes that the system or the person with the most flexibility of behavior will control the system and or not just survive, but thrive, going back to the topic of this panel discussion. You know, the pandemic didn't distress me. It empowered me. It was an opportunity to transition the vast majority of my face-to-face coaching and my therapy sessions, my many training deliveries online, which subsequently provided me with greater global reach. It elevated my profile. It expanded my credibility. It expanded my global reach. If not for the pandemic, I wouldn't be a published author, let alone a 2-time #1 Amazon best-selling author. Thank you, Global Influencers Publishing House. And it's highly likely, again, if not for the pandemic, that I would have launched into the world of public speaking, to the global world of public speaking, with the volition I did. You know, I'm a firm believer that through adversity comes opportunity. Life's not happening to you, it's happening for you. Don't be a victim of circumstance. As I previously touched on, live life by design, not by default.
Brilliant. I loved what you said. Consider obstacle to be a detour in pushing you in the right direction. And that is so true. And what you said about the whole global reach. And I think a lot of us over here will agree. Had it not been for the pandemic, we wouldn't have been here where we are today. The fact that we are now okay to talk to people in different countries and, you know, grow our businesses, grow our network, we never had been able to do that. Had the pandemic not hit us, we would still be doing things as is. Status quo was what it was, and everything has changed. And yes, of course, we're not saying, you know, pandemic was a good thing and that it, you know, should have happened. But the fact is, we've all looked beyond that. We've all moved beyond that. We've gone from the whole surviving to the thriving mode. We've gone past the problems. And of course, as humans, the resilience has kicked in and we have looked at the bigger picture. And that, as in your words, is truly, truly a gift. And so with that, my next question is for you, Kiran, because you are an extremely positive person. But I want to know from you, how do you keep up when others around you are constantly negative? What has been your advice to those who feel like they're just surviving? Kiran, can you unmute yourself? There we go.
Thank you for that question, Dr. Gupta. You know, I don't want to make small of this or big of me being positive. There is a strong stigma of negative attitude around mental health. Anxiety, fear, and depression are not uncommon post-pandemic, especially. Talking to trusted people about your concerns and feelings, or seeking a therapist, psychologist, is one consideration. During my mentoring time that I felt was my calling, there was a young person that landed on my calendar, and the person was suicidal. And I have not been in a situation to handle something like that, you know. And I had to seek advice myself and approach this carefully from bringing this person from that situation to where that person was healthy again. So this is not a small matter. So we have to, consider. And then during that course, I started writing, points and, discussion material and things that I would, having learned from this incident, be able to help others, through this. So I highly recommend talking to trusted people about your concerns and feelings, or seeking a psychologist or a therapist. Like I said, that is one consideration. I too felt an immediate need to be connected with others. I started talking with my family daily. We had to do this via WhatsApp, video calls, whatever. I continued to go for my purposeful long walks, to take in what nature had for me, to draw from nature, to draw from my faith, regardless of the weather. And I started taking pictures of the surrounding nature, and I ended up receiving new thoughts, content for my talks, content for my writing, setting new goals, and again, reinventing myself, finding ways to serve deeper. And all of these things strengthened me. What would I say to people who feel they're just thriving? Try to practice resilience. This is not something we're born with, definitely. It is a process. It has to be learned and built over time to help us adapt to changing experience. Resilience does demand persistence, that which allows us to move forward. Resilience gives us the ammunition to cope with turbulence, trauma, and tragedy. Don't allow for ourselves to be defeated by obstacles. Let us find a purpose, be, say, more introspective, learn to prioritize what we want for ourselves, no matter which generation we may identify ourselves with. We shouldn't be afraid to seek help as needed, whether it's a mentor or a counselor, or a friend, or a therapist. There is no shame in these circumstances to want to reach out. On the contrary, I believe that it is an act of courage to reach out and to want to be in the wellness mindset, so to speak. What I did for myself was I took the initiative to want to learn something new. So I learned a new language. I started taking French, and getting to know my instructor, and we developed a lovely relationship just over the phone. I learned new songs, and I started, being an author and understanding how hard it is to get your name out there, get your book published and all that. I encouraged other authors, new authors, to send me their books for reviews, or to buy their books and then connect with them and befriend them and encourage them, And that gave me so much joy, meeting so many new authors and being able to connect with them in that way. And finally, definitely take time to reflect on how we have grown in resilience and celebrate each small victory as it comes. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And it's so interesting, like some of the things you mentioned were such simple things. And often we don't realize the beauty that lies in simple things. We all want to overcomplicate, and we all want this brilliant, a workbook and everything, which tells us, but such simple things, and we can learn so much. So thank you very much for sharing that. And Gina, before I go to you, I do want to share some interesting comments that are coming in. Everybody saying, love it, celebrate each victory. Little things are often the big things. Love your positivity, Kiran, and completely agree. We need to reach out for help when needed. The research is clear. Resilience is a capacity, not an innate trait. And yes, resilience can be learned, and like you said, it requires persistence. Also, we have some more comments saying grit is passion and perseverance towards long-term goals. But she says people often overlook the passion part. Perseverance and especially passion may sound unteachable, but they aren't. It takes time and consistency. And purposeful direction is one of the 8 factors of resilience that we work with. Passion with what you want to do in long term helps provide perspective, sometimes all one needs. Loving every minute in this discussion, we all know the quotes, but they essentially touch the right chords when they get mentioned by people who endure adversity and come out stronger. And of course, somebody's also loved this comment 150%. And for UKA, I love this. A setback is a setup for a comeback, obstacles being a detour in the right direction, and flexibility is the key. Nothing changes if nothing changes. And of course, we also have a comment that says, I truly believe there is a gift in everything, and whatever happens, happens for a reason. So thank you, everyone, for these amazing, amazing comments that are coming through. One of the techniques that Gina is also mentioning is breathe, be present, commune with nature, move your body. And for Kiran, it is an act of courage to reach out, truly, truly, and love the discussion and love the story of Kiran. So again, thank you everybody who has been sharing. So please keep them coming. And now, Gina, we're back to you, because we all want to know your Survive to Thrive framework and how that's helpful, especially in today's trying times. So pandemic is still here, but there are going to be more and more things. So now we've already learned that life is uncertain. We need to learn how we're going to overcome whatever challenges that come through. So how is this framework applicable moving forward?
So I just want to do a quick voice test. Are you hearing me clear? Perfect. All right. So Valerie, Christiane, and Kiran have shared incredible examples of how they've been able to frame their stories because they are sitting in the Thrive cycle. So in the Thrive cycle, what this looks like from a technique perspective is that you're able to take a step back and you're able to frame what I've learned, how I've grown, how I'm stronger, wiser. You're able to reflect and learn from past experiences, and you're able to consolidate some of those supportive relationships. Yeah. You're also able to frame your story and align it with your values and principles, which is exactly what they've done. So what they've done is they've actually demonstrated practically what that looks like from a behavioral perspective when you're in Thrive mode. But I have to warn you, okay? So I'm going to hold up this little graphic again, and I've got my voice virtual, so it's not perfect. But I want you just to think of, are we seeing it? No. I want you to think of 4 quadrants, yeah? And what you've got is whenever there is a setback, challenge, or change, you go from survival, hopefully into adapt, into recover, and into thrive. But what's next to thrive? So ladies, what I need you to do is take your stories, take your resilience muscle, and be prepared for the next challenge, setback, and challenge, because it's coming. All right, so when we're in Thrive mode, understand it's not permanent. That's the beauty of being human and living this life. All right, so what I wanted to do is, instead of kind of saying, look, here out of the 32 resilience strategies and techniques that we teach across 8 factors of resilience, I thought what I'd rather do, thinking about who's on the panel and listening to us, is I thought, let me give you a quick story of someone who used the Thrive cycle to frame where she was at and make decisions, conscious decisions around which resilience strategies were most appropriate. Okay, so one client called me up. She said, Gina, I'm failing. I'm failing as a mom. I'm failing on my personal front. I feel I'm a failure at work. I need to just have a conversation with you. And if she'd done this in 2018, and I had actually been a coach beforehand, I would have looked at it in a slightly different frame. But she was really, when I was on the Zoom call with her, you could see she was emotionally in a stress point. Her eyes were blinking. She was talking fast. She wasn't breathing very deeply, etc. And she was absolutely in survival mode. And she said to me, I'm failing on each front. So what I did was I very quickly showed her this little map. And I said, okay, so let's just stop. Right now, what you need to do is, let's just breathe. I'm here, you're safe, and you've called me. So I just want to validate that, right? So she just she calmed down a little bit. And then I said to her, what's most important to you? Where do you think you are failing? Like, what are the most important roles? So she said, I'm failing at home and at work. I said, okay, so what are your two most important roles at work? She said, I'm part of the global leadership team and I manage the regional team here and I'm sitting in Singapore. I said, okay, fine. Where on the Thrive cycle are you with your team? And she's like, oh, so I told her what the various ones were and she immediately mapped. She mapped that on a regional role, she was actually sitting in recovery mode. And how she knew she was in recovery mode was that she had realized she was totally out of her comfort zone. She had already started to put in place different ways of managing stressors. And those were starting to have traction. So in the recovery phase, it's how you bounce back. It's how what you've started to do in adapting becomes a new way of operating. And she was starting to feel a little bit more energized around that. So I said to her, okay, so talk to me about your two most important personal roles. You said you're failing at home. So she's, yeah, as a wife and as a mom, and I have two kids, one special needs. So I said, okay, so right now, where are you on here as a wife? And she went, oh my word, actually I'm thriving. Can I say that? I said, really? You're thriving with your husband? Give me the evidence. and then she said, actually with my children as well. And she said to me, you know, because we're all at home, for the first time, issues that my husband and I, we just didn't talk about in terms of the way we communicate and how we show up for each other, because we're always on planes. We're doing that. We're closer than ever before. I'm closer to my children, my special needs daughter. I'm in these Zoom calls with her. I'm more in contact with the teachers. So I said, oh, and her whole energy changed. And she was able to describe a little bit like everyone else on the panels described when you're in Thrive mode. Then we went back to where she was with as a team leader. And then I asked her, where's your team? Is your team in recovery mode as well? And that's when the penny dropped. And she said, actually not. They still are, they still believe they are, that they're not out of their comfort zone and they're not happy in the stretch zone. In the stretch zone, we know this is where we learn and perform. Okay, so she then realized she's sitting in recovery, her team's sitting in adapt. So that began to inform her around how she might support her team and their resilience. And then the source of her stress was actually her global role, which she firmly put in survival mode. And so we spoke about that. And what we were able to do is in that moment, frame her world and those multiple dynamic roles she has and the multi-dimension of most of our lives. And from that, she was able to then choose which strategies, ways of thinking about things, ways of feeling about things, and ways of operating and showing up in action would be most appropriate. And so that's why, I mean, I just think that if you're taking anything from my very small contribution today, is that resilience is a resource. And it's also a series of attitudes, feelings, and thoughts about what is happening to you. And hopefully you can use the Thrive cycle as a way to make more informed decisions around what's going to be appropriate for you, your context, your environment, the roles you have, and you will find that you will be better able to deal with setbacks and challenge and change, not just today and post the impact of this pandemic, but actually throughout your life. And so I hope that that is a small little gift for you. And knowing that on this panel, like Christy and Kiran and Neera, yourself and Valerie, they've absolutely showcased what it means and what it looks like when you're in Thrive mode. But as I said, remember, the next setback is coming.
Thank you for that, Gina. No wonder they call you the catalyst. And, thank you for sharing a real life example to help us understand, because now we can all kind of put ourselves in those shoes and be like, oh yeah, that's kind of where we were at. Oh, and and again, we don't realize a lot of these things until somebody actually tells us that, look, you're in this stage and they're in this stage, and this is how you communicate differently with different things. So thank you very much for sharing that. And of course, thank you everybody for being here today. Of course, thank you, Kiran, Gina, Christiane, and Valerie for such a candid and meaningful conversation. I'm sure the audiences have taken in a lot, and we can see that from all of the comments that have been coming through. And I think one of the main thing was how we've all made some positive changes in our lives, and how the pandemic taught us so much more. And of course, to everybody else who was part of this as well, we're all at different stages. And even though it's been 2 years, we're coming out of it in different ways. And it's okay to ask for help. There are, like we said, resilience is something that can be learned. Positivity is something that can be learned. So do not be afraid to ask for help. And of course, big thank you to our audiences once again for supporting all of the panelists with all your wonderful comments that were coming through. And of course, if you wanted to connect with our panelists, please do so. Their details have already been posted on the chat group, so do connect with them. But before we go, I want us to take a quick group photo. So let's do that. Shika, can you come back? There we go. Perfect. Okay. And we're ready. And let's get one more with this year's Break the Bias.
Kiran, can you lift a little higher? Yeah, that's right. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you so much, ladies.
Thank you, Dr. Gupta.